Hey everyone, Cam White here, and welcome to your 2022 year ahead horoscope for Libra, Sun, and Rising. I'm really excited to be going over all of the transits today. Pretty much in this video, what we're going to be doing is going over every major transit that 2022 has going on for it, and we're going to be going over where exactly it's going to be showing up in your life, how it's going to be really affecting you. This is like a two-part video series that I'm doing. I have another video which I'll link in the description. That goes over every major transit of 2022. And I talk about the transit in and of itself and what it symbolizes and what it means. But in this video, we're going to be talking about how that exact transit is going to be affecting you as a Libra rising. So make sure you check that out as well. We're going to be going into every major transit. Other thing, if you want to catch up or if you want to keep up to speed with every single month of 2022, I offer monthly horoscopes for every zodiac sign over on my Patreon. That also, you get exclusive content as well as ad-free content, early release content, a bunch of other things too. So check that out if that's something that you're interested in. But with that being said, let's go ahead and start talking about the horoscope. So, few things about 2022 that we have to kind of preface this with. Well, we're ending 2021 with two big things. And the first thing I got to talk about is Jupiter. So at the very end of 2021, Jupiter is going to ingress into Pisces. Now, Jupiter did already ingress into Pisces for like 5 minutes earlier in 2021. I want you to think back to about May and June of 2021. What was going on for you then? What were you kind of focused on? Jupiter entered Pisces and then went retrograde and then left Pisces, went back into Aquarius for the rest of the year. But at the end of the year, Jupiter is going to go back into Pisces. So it's going to kind of bring up stuff that kind of came up in May and June of 2021. So that's something that's really important to think about. Jupiter rules things like faith, hope, optimism, your belief, expansion, abundance, all the good stuff, right? Jupiter is entering its home sign of Pisces, which means Jupiter can operate really well here, right? Like Jupiter has all of the resources that it needs to do its job. Jupiter can increase things at a really big way, or in a really, what's the word I'm looking for? Increase things in a big way? I don't know what I'm trying to say here. Jupiter in Pisces, though, it's good. But Jupiter is going to be entering your 6th house. Now, the 6th house is really interesting because the 6th house rules things like your work, like much more about like your labor, like not so much your title, but like just the actual work that you're doing. So for example, maybe your title doesn't change, but you have an increase in your workload. The 6th house also rules employees and coworkers. So this can be an expansion with you could be hiring more people. You could be dealing with more coworkers. You could be having really fun coworkers or fun employees at the moment. The 6th house also rules pets. This is something else that I sometimes fail to mention a lot in my horoscopes, but it is a really important part of the 6th house. So this can bring up pets. This can bring up your animals, all that kind of stuff. The 6th house, though, also rules health. Now, in astrology, the 1st house is much more of the significator of good health versus the 6th house is actually much more about poor health or ill health. The 6th house is known for things breaking. It's kind of known as a bad house. It can be bad. It can be frustrating. It's not the worst house ever, to be honest with you. It's like far from that, but it does rule things breaking. It does rule ill health. So you can deal with like sickness and disease that's going to be found here, or like breaking things. But Jupiter rules your 6th house, right? So it's your 6th house significator. With it going into your 6th house, this is going to bring up health topics in a really big way. So I think you're just going to be more focused on your health, more focused on your work, your day-to-day routine. How are you optimizing this area? How are you maximizing this area? Are you getting all of the fruits of your labor is a good way to put it. But there is going to be this really big look at 6th house work, health, habits. That's another big thing, your habits, like your routines, the things that necessarily aren't always good for you. Anyway, also rules pets. So expect a lot of these topics to come up, and we're going to come back to this throughout this horoscope because Jupiter in Pisces has a lot more things coming up to it. But as Jupiter goes in your 6th house, think back to May and June of 2021. You're going to come back to that area. You're going to come back to that kind of mindset. Second thing, starting January of 2020. Well, again, we're ending 2021 with Venus retrograding in Capricorn. But as we go through January, Venus is going to be retrograding Capricorn the whole time. Venus technically entered shadow in November, and I should have a link to the video. I have a video about the Venus retrograde. It should be somewhere in the description or maybe somewhere on YouTube. I'm not sure. Anyway, because I'm recording this really early in the future. But anyway, Venus Venus is going to enter shadow in November of I almost said 2019, of 2021. And so a lot of context and a lot of the themes for this Venus retrograde are going to build up starting November. Venus will be in shadow all of December and then station retrograde a few days before Christmas. And then she'll be retrograde all of January. Now, what's important about Venus and Venus's retrogrades is Venus retrogrades in the same exact sign every 8 years. So this is important because life is cyclical and astrology helps us really, pinpoint some of those cycles. And you've been here before. Venus is going to be retrograde in your 4th house, and you've had this before. This is also important because Venus is your ruling planet as a Libra. So I want you to think back to January and February and March of 2014. What was going on? Even December of 2013, because Venus would have stationed retrograde at 28 Capricorn, December of 2013, and then been retrograde January, and then stationed direct February of 2014, March 2014. So think back to then, because a lot of similar themes are going to come up. Venus represents you in your chart. It's your ruling planet. So this is really, really important in terms of your body, your image, your self-perception, your ideals about yourself, the way that you view the world, the way that you view yourself. Venus also rules your 8th house of death, other people's money, transactions, inheritance, taxes, secrets, the occult. So that's not to say that you're going to die or anything like that. But Venus just rules over 2 really specific places in your chart that you'll probably see come up a lot. But anyway, Venus is going to station retrograde on Pluto in Capricorn in your 4th house. Here's what you got to know. The 4th house rules things like family, home life, living situation, your parents, where you're from, your foundation, right? Usually just represents your home. Venus retrograding, you're probably going to move. You're probably going to have some relationship change within the home or the family context. This could be a change with your parents. This is Venus ruling the 8th house too. This could be involving some type of death, inheritance when it comes to family matters too. So it's just stuff to think about. With this being your 1st house ruler too, I think your relationship to your family, your relationship to your parents, your home life is going to change in a really radical way. And we're starting January off with that. We're going to keep talking about that in just a minute. But as Venus is retrograde, the rules in which you engage, Venus is all about fun and games, right? And enjoying things. But Capricorn's all about rules and systems and regulations. So Venus retrograding in Capricorn is like a change to the rules. And so how exactly you form a relationship with your parents or how you involve yourself with your family, that's what's really kind of changing here in a really big way. And we're starting January off this way. We're still talking about January, right? So also on January 14th, this is the big transit of January, right? Venus is going to retrograde. It's going to be pretty crazy in the news. But also on January 14th, Mercury stations retrograde exactly square Uranus. This is kind of actually a pretty prominent Mercury retrograde. So Mercury will station retrograde in your 5th house, squaring Uranus. And around January, as Mercury's in your 5th house, the 5th house rules love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, creativity. It rules vices. It rules partying, essentially, and gambling and having fun. As Mercury stations retrograde, you're going to be seeing this area in a new light, in a new way. Mercury plays games, Mercury plays tricks, Mercury often offers delays, he'll give you a delay in something. Mercury will have you rethink something, and this is going to be in your 5th house of all that stuff. Your Saturn's there too. So you're just really thinking about, what you want, what you enjoy, your creativity. But Mercury's going to be stationing retrograde square Uranus. So this is a little funky. Uranus is in your 8th house. The 8th house, Uranus transiting 8th house is kind of weird because the 8th house rules, again, death, secrets, other people's money, transactions, the occult, taboo things. Sometimes it can rule sex, but that's depending on what astrologer you ask. But as Mercury is in your 5th squaring Uranus, this is going to be a very sudden, a very I didn't see that coming, change or hiccup when it comes to 5th house things and 8th house things. So love, romance, sex, pleasure, 8th house of secrets, other people's stuff. I would expect the unexpected around here. That's mostly January. So January, again, just to also put things into perspective, March is much more of the month where things really start, but January, it's there's so many changes that we have first thing going into the new year. And that's really what it is. So that actually brings us to about February because Mercury's going to go retrograde. Mercury will go back into Capricorn and station direct pretty much on top of Pluto. So this is also going to be a big change with family, home life, living situation stuff. But what I want to bring your attention to is about February 4th, because by February 4th, three things happen. One is Venus stations direct. So this is important because Venus has been retrograde since December. It's all retrograde through January. All of the changes and the value changes and the boundary changes within your home and family, that all comes to kind of a halt and a close by February 4th. A real bottom is a good way to put it. Mars also enters your fourth house. So Mars is all about energy, drive, fighting, conflict, separating, cutting from things. Mars is exalted in the sign of Capricorn, which is just a fancy way of saying Mars does really well there. Think of Mars. Think of, competition and action, and think of Saturn, or think of Capricorn, right? It's all about rules, regulations, systems. And, usually people do pretty well and can be really efficient with their energy if they have a plan, if they have the system. Mars likes to be in Capricorn. Mars is going to be in your fourth house of home, family, living situation. So this is going to, for one, energize this area. So you're just going to see more things happening here. Two, you're probably going to be dealing with more fights and conflicts in this area, or separating, or inflammation. You're probably going to be working a lot in this area. And then Mars is also going to be conjoining Venus through the whole month of February and going into March, which we'll talk about also in March. But as Mars and Venus are pretty much conjoining each other, there's this really big, now that the rules have changed, now you can kind of have more energy to put into your family and your home life and your living situation, right? It's a really big structural change here. Mercury also stations direct. And so this is kind of bringing a lot of clarity to things. Mercury stationing direct on Pluto. I think there's going to be a lot of fear that you might have around changes. Really just changes, because this is kind of bringing up everything from 2018, 2019, 2020, and it's kind of wrapping all of that up. But anyway, all through February, we're going to have this Mars-Venus conjunction, which is really, so Mars and Venus, they conjoin all the time, but they're going to be exactly together for a whole month, by the degree, which is pretty rare. Look at this. You have all of this Capricorn stuff, all the Saturn stuff. Things look like you're setting in a new foundation. You're really trying to get a solid ground in your home life, your living situation. This could be moving. This could be family stuff. It's going to be depending, of course, on what's kind of going on. But family, home life, living situation stuff for sure. Mars and Venus are pretty much together the whole time. And then that brings us really, again, you're focused on the home family stuff here pretty much strictly, which brings us to March 2nd. A few things happen on March 2nd. One, Venus is now out of shadow. So this is March, by the way. Think about this. Venus entered shadow in November, then was in shadow all of December, stationed retrograde in the very end of December. It was retrograde all of January, then stationed direct at the beginning of February, was still in shadow all of February. Then by the time we get to March, that's when Venus leaves shadow. That's 5 months of Venus in Capricorn. That's your ruling planet being focused on one part of your chart for a long time, right? So this is a big focus on your home and living situation for the first part of the year. Venus leaves shadow by this point, so we're all wrapped up with everything that you've been doing since November. Venus is still on top of Mars, so this is a lot of momentum. That's the big thing. This is a lot of momentum. It's not just you're having energy and a lot of things. It's building up momentum and speed to do something really big. And Venus and Mars are going to be conjoining Pluto. That's going to look really different for everyone, because Pluto rules things like destruction and power. And so for some people, this might be a really big, powerful move. For some people, this might be maybe you're moving and it's really the end of a story for you. For some people, this might be a house problem. But really expect a lot of those topics to kind of come full circle by March 2nd, the family, home life, living situation stuff. Mercury is also conjoining Saturn. Now, remember, in January, Mercury stationed retrograde in Aquarius, squaring Uranus, stationed on top of Pluto, moved back into Aquarius. Mercury conjoining Saturn, there's a lot of realities that are kind of hitting here that you're kind of understanding at this point. And this is a new moon in your 6th house. This is clearing out that energy of work, coworkers, pets, health, routines, day-to-day activities. So a lot of things, in my opinion, this is going to be the beginning of the year, where we can, I think January is all downhill. February is a rock bottom. March, we're on to new things, but it's the analogy I've been using is March is kind of when you go, when you move as a kid and you're going to the new school. It's that. It's this is weird, and you can kind of be whoever you want. But anyway, we go into March, and this is the big thing. Around the beginning of March, Mars and Venus both, they're still exactly conjoining each other, by the way. Crazy. It lasts for over a whole calendar month, which is really, really wild. But as Mars and Venus go into Aquarius, you have Mercury, Saturn, Mars, Venus, all in your 5th house. creativity, recreation, like straight up. What do you do? Do you have any hobbies? What do you like to do for fun? What is fun for you? Saturn's been in your fifth house here for quite some time. So you've been really changing and really solidifying and crystallizing what exactly you can and can't do when it comes to fun, when it comes to love, romance, sex, children, pleasure, art, music, creativity. And I think this is really like Mars, Venus, Saturn, Mercury. This is kind of like getting yourself new into something. I think this is being like a beginner at something, but like getting into a new craft, getting into a new hobby, having a lot of fun with it. I really like this. And a lot of March is just playing with your new toys, essentially, which is a funny way to kind of put it. But really, I mean, it's Mars and Venus going through your fifth house with Saturn. This is like, like remember being a kid and like you'd get that one toy after you begged your parents for it, and then you take it home and you like play with it until you're sick of it. Like kind of like when you listen to a song for the first time and you love it, so you listen to it over and over and over again until you're sick of it. That's kind of like March. You're doing something new. And as we get into March, the biggest thing is Mars, Venus in your fifth house. A lot of focus on the love, romance stuff, on the creativity. Think similarly to like January and February of 2021 last year. But the next thing is Mercury is also going to be in Pisces. So let's actually fast forward to just this, like when Mercury conjoins Jupiter. This is on March 20th. This is good, but this is also like really kind of confusing, a little hectic. Mercury conjoining Jupiter, I think there's a lot of awareness coming in around your schedule and your work and your routine and your health and stuff like that. And there's just a bigger focus on that. It might be a little like overwhelming. Like it might be a little bit confusing, but it's good. Mars and Venus are also going to be squaring Uranus too. So like the biggest thing here is trying to find stability with these new endeavors, with this new recreation, but it's squaring Uranus. Like, you're going to have some pitfalls. You're going to have some things that are like, if you're expecting everything to be very stable during this time, it's not going to work like that. Like if you're with all this fifth house stuff, if you're really trying to redefine what's fun for you or have a new relationship with pleasure and enjoyment, squaring Uranus, like it's going to be a fresh start, and it's going to be like wet concrete. You can't lean on it all the time. You got to let some time for it to dry. Anyway, March is really about doing new things, in my opinion. All this Aquarius stuff, really just trying to, get comfortable with this new weird energy. Which really leads us to April. So when we get to April, few things happen. One, we have this like Mercury Cazimi in your seventh house. This is going to be like a clarity around relationships, a clarity around specific individuals in your life. That's on April 2nd. That's not the biggest deal in the world. What is a big deal though is this. Venus enters Pisces starting on April 5th. This is a big deal because as we get I've been trying to tell everyone, I've been a broken record with this. April is pretty much the funnest month of the whole year. It's really, really good. Now, Jupiter is still in your sixth house, right? It's been flying through your sixth house, is now conjoining Neptune in your sixth house. This is hard to explain and talk about because Jupiter, Neptune, you're going to see this in the movie industry and the film industry. You're going to see this renaissance and creativity and stuff. But as Jupiter and Neptune's in your sixth house, this could be like, it's one of those things where Jupiter and Neptune rules things like Neptune rules like the media and Jupiter rules like storytelling. And this is in your sixth house of work, day-to-day activities. So maybe you're posting more of your workout videos. Maybe you're doing social media work. I don't know. What I can say is Jupiter and Neptune, there might be some new type of media involved in your work. And with Venus and Jupiter going through your sixth house, this is going to be... So I would say that this would be good for good health, but Venus and Jupiter going through your sixth house, you might kind of slob out, like kind of like not really care as much, but that's fine. But I think Venus and Jupiter going through your sixth house, you're really going to be enjoying your work and your labor and your day-to-day routines and having a lot of fun with that, which is really important. Mars is also going to conjoin Saturn, which this is also another important thing on April 5th. The last time Mars and Saturn conjoined each other was March 12th, 2020. Do you remember what happened that day? Mars and Saturn are coming back to your fifth house. What have you learned since then? What has changed since then? Especially around fifth house things of love, romance, sex, creativity, vices, partying, gambling, all of that stuff. As Venus goes into your sixth house, this is more of a focus on work. Mars and Saturn in the fifth. Things are getting kind of real and really serious around the creativity side and the love, romance stuff. Then Mars enters Pisces. Jupiter's on top of Neptune. Like things are just kind of like good for the most part. And then that really leads us to April 30th. Now, April 30th is the big day. Let's go on. So out of everybody, this is probably going to be the weirdest for you guys. Because here's the thing. So Jupiter is going to be conjoining Neptune, which is like awesome. Really, really good for your work, your routine, health stuff, schedule, siblings, family stuff. But Jupiter is also going to be conjoining Neptune. Things will get a little crazy, but Venus is also going to conjoin Jupiter, which again, Venus is your ruling planet, right? So there's this kind of like doing things in a really big way. So this could be really like again, expansion with your work, an expansion with your routine, expansion with pets, health, doing things in a really, really big way, very, very dreamy way. But there's also an eclipse in your 8th house. This eclipse is ruled by Venus, right? And this is, this is something that I should have a video about at this point. You'll see it. I'll have a video about this. You'll see it around. But I'll have a video about the nodes going into Taurus and Scorpio because I haven't talked about that yet. But in 2022, the eclipses are going to be in Taurus and Scorpio. So this is going to be activating and highlighting your 8th house of death, other people's money, transactions. And as you have these 8th house eclipses come up, you're just going to see those topics kind of get like really thrown in your face in a very loud way. The South Node, well, like the North Node in your 8th house, you're going to be kind of moving towards this direction, while the South Node is going to be going through your 2nd house. You're going to be kind of changing the way that you make money. You're going to be kind of maybe having a lot of expenses that you have to, you're going to be changing your relationship with money essentially. But this eclipse in your 8th house really starts that off. And I think this really comes from work, day-to-day activities, health. I mean, eclipse in your 8th house, that's not going to be the funnest. This is a really good eclipse, but it's also like, this is just a really weird time for you, a really transitionary time in my opinion. Which that leads us to May. Let me take a drink real quick. So we get to May, and the big thing with May is we'll have like this Mercury retrograde in Gemini. That's not really the biggest deal for you guys. But the big deal in May is Jupiter goes into Aries. This is huge because, again, Jupiter rules the 3rd house. The 3rd house, like the junk drawer of the chart, it rules your siblings, day-to-day activities. It rules short-distance travel, neighbors, family members that aren't necessarily your parents. If the 9th house is like what you're educated in, what you have experience in, the 3rd house is like how you actually utilize that education practically, right? And Jupiter's it also rules like relationships that are close to you, like neighbors and siblings, right? Jupiter also rules your 6th house of work, day-to-day activities, health, pets, stuff like that. Jupiter is going to go into Aries in your 7th house, where there's this expansion with relationships. Jupiter, again, abundance, expansion, doing things in a big way. It's going to be in the sign of Aries, where Jupiter has to do its job, right? Which is to have abundance and expansion. But it's doing it with Mars's tools because it's in Mars's house, right? It's driving Mars's car. Mars is like one of the key phrases, I guess you could say, that I've been describing Jupiter Aries is like, if you believe it, you can do it. But if you're going to do it, you got to believe it. Like Jupiter in Aries is like belief and action kind of like having a synchronicity. Jupiter in Aries is like, you don't even have to believe in yourself, just do it. And that's where you get the faith. That's where you get the abundance. That's where you get the hope. And Jupiter is going to enter your 7th house of relationships, other people, individuals, marriage. The 7th house rules all types of individuals, so be a little bit open-minded with what that can look like, but this is going to be expanding relationships just in general. Which, let's fast forward to the end of May, because the end of May, there's 2 things going on. One is Mars will also ingress into Aries, and there's a Mars freaking Jupiter conjunction in your 7th house. Mars rules your 7th house of relationships and individuals. This is like a really big relationship, things going like you're really engaged with someone at this point, doing things in a big way. Mars is your 2nd house ruler. This has to do with money too, in a weird way, and coworkers. In the 7th house of relationships, maybe you're working with someone, engaged with someone much more. Mercury is also going to be stationing direct, like square Saturn. So there is this kind of like rough reality that you're kind of setting within at this point too, regarding like, this could be around like schooling and like finances around schooling for some of you. Mercury is going to go retrograde in your 9th house of like publishing and far distance travel and squaring Saturn in your 5th. This is very much like a mental woo-woo type Mercury retrograde. Maybe nothing super specific. But it is, the end of May will be a little bit frustrating when Mercury stations square Saturn, but Mars conjoining Jupiter, like definitely doing big things with relationships at that point. Which that brings us to June. June, not a lot's going on, really. The only 2 things in June that I really saw, like Venus will go through Taurus, which has its perks, but Saturn goes retrograde. Saturn barely dipped into Aquarius the first time from March, April, May, and June of 2020. Then at the very end of 2020, December of 2020 to January of 2021, Saturn fully ingressed into Aquarius. Since January of 2021, all until we're now at June of 2022, that's about a year and a half, Saturn's been in Aquarius. It's been flying through your fifth house. Saturn rules authority. Saturn rules discipline. Saturn rules rules and regulations and systems and boundaries and things like that, right? And it's been in your fifth house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, children, art. I've said it like 10 times now. What have you learned in this area? Because I think as Saturn is moving direct, it's like you're taking on new authority and responsibility, and it's like, yeah, I got the power. This feels good. But then Saturn will station retrograde, which the last time Saturn stationed retrograde was May, June, July, August, and September of 2021. So think back what was going on, earlier in the summer of 2021. That was kind of like, like the weight of that responsibility kind of came up and it was a little heavy. And then Saturn station direct, it's been good. But as Saturn stations retrograde again, there's this sense of like the responsibility, the authority, the maturity. It all becomes very heavy and much harder to maybe deal with. It's a lot, responsibility is a two-way street, right? It's cool to be in charge and in the leadership of things, but also it all falls on you. And I think as Saturn stations retrograde, you're going to be really questioning your authority, your control, and your relationship to, again, fifth house topics, right? Venus is also going to conjoin Uranus and the North Node and make a square to Saturn. So there's all like Venus in your eighth house too is like making the eighth house is shared resources, other people's money. This is good for that. But as Venus is on top of Uranus, there's a lot of unpredictability. There's a lot of destabilizing energy. What was stable isn't. And as Venus is going through here, again, it's just a weird thing around fifth house of like the fun stuff and the eighth house, the bad stuff. Where exactly that shows up for you guys specifically on every little viewer that watches this, I don't know, but that is where it's going to be showing up. And that's June. Like literally June does not have a lot going on. The only thing after that is, yeah, I mean like Mars and Jupiter are going to be going through flying through your seventh house. So again, a lot of energy with, I think this is big about relationships, honestly. And then when we get to the end of June, Mercury and Venus will go through your ninth house. That's going to be better for like learning and traveling and just doing more fun things. Which that brings us to July, which a lot changes right at the beginning of July. There's really only two big things in July. The first one is Mars enters Taurus. This isn't going to be fun. This is going to show up a little bit later and we'll talk about it. But as Mars, energy, drive, action, it's entering detriment. Hasn't been in detriment in a while. It's actually had a lot of dignity in the past couple months. Mars and Taurus, we're going to slow down a little bit. Think of the last time Mars entered Taurus was, January 6th of 2021, January and February. What was going on then around death, other people's money, maybe your anxiety, maybe shared resources, maybe even sex, right? Mars rules your second house of money too. Maybe you're making less money. Maybe you were making more money. Maybe you're making investments. Anyway, think about that because Mars is going to go into your eighth house where Mars rules separation, cutting, inflammation. It's in detriment, so there's going to be a bunch of problems. It's in your eighth house of shared resources, other people's money. Like, for example, what's fun about astrology is that just like how life's not all about you, your chart's not all about you. So for a lot of people, because Mars rules your seventh house of partners and it's in your eighth house of their money, this could be like your partner spending more. Like if you're married, this could be like your partner spending more money or they have money issues or something like that. Anyway, as Mars goes into Taurus, I think there's going to be just like an overall layer of anxiety that kind of hits. Like it's just going to like eighth house transits just make you trip in general, but Mars will definitely turn that up a little bit. But you're probably going to, Mars also rules your second house of money and it's going to be a detriment in your eighth house of like investment. So I could see this being like difficulty with money at some degree, not like the worst thing ever, but at a certain level. That pretty much continues. And here's the thing. That's mostly July. It's just Mars going through your eighth house. We get to Leo season. Things will lighten up a little bit, but there's like two things that happen right at the very end of July. On July 29th, Jupiter stations retrograde. Jupiter has given you all of these new things in terms of schedule, time, work, energy, health, relationships. As Jupiter stations retrograde, this is really about like can you do the wax on, wax off without questioning it, right? Like, Jupiter retrograde is like, are you integrating the knowledge that you've learned? Are you understanding where you could apply that? Jupiter rules like gifts and abundance, right? And there's an ebb and flow in life. Jupiter direct represents where there is a flow, and Jupiter retrograde shows where there's an ebb, and you kind of have to still be grateful for what you have, count all your blessings type shit. Jupiter's going to go retrograde in your 7th house, where you're going to start to be much more reflective and introspective about these new relationships, about this new work that you're doing, right? Which is really important because 3 days, August 1st, I've talked about this a lot in the other video. This is like my 7th year ahead horoscope, so this is my 7th time talking about this. Mars conjoining Uranus in the North Node. This is not good. This is probably the worst day of 2022. This is looking kind of difficult for you guys. Here's the reality. Mars rules your 2nd house of money and your 7th house of relationships. It's on the North Node, which the North Node intensifies and just brings intensity and dramatism. It dramatizes the situation, right? Mars is on Uranus, where Uranus rules unpredictability, destabilizing events, things that weren't necessarily expected. Mars rules, accidents, problems, and like this is in your. So for one, this is going to look a lot of different ways. One, you could lose some money. Two, bad investment. An accident happens with someone. This could bring up a death. This could just be like something that happens very unexpectedly that's out of your control. And again, if Mars or Saturn is your time lord, that's a bigger deal. Like if Mars and Saturn aren't your time lord, this isn't the biggest deal in the world, but this is a very gnarly transit and it's in a very gnarly place. And I can't emphasize, like, I don't want to like scare people, but this is definitely like, I would expect this to be a very serious time, to say the least. Like, and you might be like, I wouldn't make I would do your best to not get out of your own way. Don't be stubborn with certain things. And also don't just make dramatic decisions and take dramatic actions based off impulsive behaviors. I think that's what can get you in trouble here. Because here's the thing: we start August off. This is a shit transit. This isn't fun. And then literally a couple days later, Mars immediately then goes to square Saturn. Look, August 7th, a week later, Mars then makes a square to Saturn. So again, 8th house stuff can involve sex, shared resources, other people's money, and it's squaring Saturn in your 5th house of love, romance, vices, stuff like that. So there is this, and again, it rules your money too. So there's some type of weird tension, I think, with your money, other people's money, and what you guys are doing with it, what's going on with it. This just looks, in my opinion, 2022 has been a pretty good year so far. This is just when it sucks for a minute, okay? But that's August. Like, that's really the biggest thing. We start August sucks for like a week. And then it kind of is like whatever after that. Venus will go into Leo, which is fine. And then Mars goes into Gemini, which is fine. That will feel one way. But that's much more important when we get a little bit later into the year, when we get to September. Let's go ahead and just jump into September because a few things happen. One is, as we start September, actually really, what is it? Two things happen. One is Mars enters shadow. We have another Mars retrograde. Mars hasn't been retrograde since winter of 2020. Wow. So we're going to have another Mars retrograde. This one's much, much better. Not as horrible as the last Mars retrograde. But Mars is going to enter shadow in your 9th house. Mars, again, energy, drive, action, anger, conflict. In the sign of Gemini, if Mars is all about like fighting and things like that, Mars and Gemini is like fighting with your words, fighting with your ideas, fighting with rationale, As Mars enters your 9th house, enters shadow, you're going to start seeing topics around, the 9th house rules traveling, far distance travel, higher education, foreign countries, foreign people, experience, social media, the internet, things like that. And as Mars kind of enters shadow, I think you're probably going to be like really energized in this area, but there's going to be something that you're going to come back to about it. Like, I don't think there's going to be like a whole bunch of issues maybe at the moment here, but maybe you're going to just be more ramped up, maybe doing things more online, maybe publishing more things, maybe taking courses or classes or something. I don't know. But whatever you start doing at the beginning of September, just remember that because you're going to come back to it a few times. That's the most important part. And then as we get to about the middle of September, we have this Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograded in Libra, fall of 2021. So Mercury, retrograding in your first house, rethinking your ideas about yourself, rethinking your ideas about who you are and your identity. You're going to come back to that in September of 2022. But this time, Mercury is going to station retrograde opposite Jupiter, where I think this is a really big look at like you and relationships. Who are you versus what does that mean for like the relationships in your life? That's going to be kind of introspective and weird. I mean, I don't even really want to say weird. It'll probably be really good for the most part. Like everything's going to be in your 12th house too. So again, introspection is I think the best word here. But that's like all of September is like this Mercury retrograde, Mars entering shadow. And then by the end of September, everything kind of goes into Libra again. Mercury will station on top of Venus, which is cool. And then like Mars will also trine Saturn too. But let's actually just fast forward to October. So October, a few things are going on like right at the very beginning of October. Mars trine Saturn, right? This is a really constructive Mars retrograde. That doesn't always mean fun. Working out and like dieting is very constructive, but it's not always the funnest thing. And Mars, does rule problems. So there is going to be issues in this area, but it's trining Saturn. So it's constructive. Like it's purposeful is a good word for this. And we're going to come back to that in a minute. Just, think about that for a moment. What's the other thing I wanted to bring up on October? Oh yeah. Saturn, Uranus. Okay. So pretty much Saturn is going to have its final square with Uranus around 2022. They've been squaring forever since January of 2021, summer of 2021, December of 2021, and now October of 2022. All of this instability and destabilizing unexpected things with, again, the fifth house, love, romance, sex, pleasure, creativity, art, music, recreation, squaring Uranus, of, liberation, destabilization, unexpected things. It's in Taurus of like foundation and security. It's in your 8th house of shared resources. Just expect some more unexpected shit, just like, it has been for the past couple years. Nothing really new there. It's just, this is definitely like one last time for the crowd type. One last, roll of the dice is a good way to put it. We start October that way. And so we kind of start October off with, again, things get really shaky again. Mercury will station direct, which is fine. The big thing I want to bring up here is this. We get Mars square Neptune. So while this is a really constructive Mars retrograde, like it's trining Saturn the whole time, it's going to be squaring Neptune, which I don't like. Because Mars in Gemini is like fighting off of a premise. And like Mars in Gemini is like fighting with, again, words, rationale, but off of an idea. And I think Mars squaring Neptune is like being confused about that idea. It's like, have you ever like learned something and then you go to repeat that information, you actually don't remember anything that you learned? Neptune's in your 6th house, right? So work, day-to-day activities, health. Neptune makes things kind of very confusing and illusionary and all over the place. And I think Mars squaring Neptune's a very like thinking you know something, but not. Mars is in your 9th house too. Spirituality, religion, higher education. And I think as Mars is in Gemini here, you're trying to understand things. You're trying to find a rationale, but there's like some roadblock you're hitting. I think Mars squaring Neptune is like there's something that you're not getting. You know what I mean? It's like if you had to go online, to make fun of some boomer people real quick. No offense to the boomers, but this is kind of like trying to do something online and you're like, why can't I go online? Your phone's not working online. And it's like, oh, well, you weren't connected to the internet. But you just didn't realize that because maybe you didn't know it or because you didn't know what to look for. This is one of those things where there's just going to be an issue and you're not really going to know where it's coming from. You're not going to really know where it is. But I think that confusion is going to be the worst of it. The sun's in Libra, Venus is in Libra, Mercury's in Libra. I think you're feeling good. I think you're feeling good during this time, but Mars squaring Neptune is just still this like, what am I supposed to be doing? Why am I doing this? What's going on here? Mars rules your 7th house of relationships too and 2nd house of money. So there's a lot of questions around that. And then, yeah, Venus and the sun are pretty much going to be going through your 1st house, which is great. We get this like Venus Cazimi right at like 29 degrees Libra, which is super awesome. This is really like new you energy right here. Feeling very good about yourself. But then everything goes into Scorpio. And we have the Venus also, because Venus will be Cazimi in both Libra and Scorpio, which is kind of unique. As the Sun and Venus go into your second house, money stuff is coming up right now. A lot of money stuff this year. So there'll be this Venus Cazimi in your second house. This is really kind of refreshing money topics, possessions, what you own, what you have, re-examining your relationship there. Then we have this total solar eclipse. And again, we have the eclipses going on in Taurus and Scorpio. So this spring, we have a bunch of eclipses in your 8th house. Now we're going to have eclipses in your second house of your money, finances, resources. There's a solar eclipse on top of Venus. So there's definitely, again, energy of maybe some bad investments. What this could look like is like a major expense that you weren't expecting to really take on, but you kind of have to do it. I would just expect money issues at this point. And this may not be like the worst thing in the world, but what this could be is like an expense you weren't expecting to pay. That's kind of some bullshit. Like maybe not like, it's like, it's very random. It's not necessarily like you're always going to have to be spending more money at this point. Well, that leads us to, and then like that's really the big focus until Halloween. Then Mars stations retrograde. So let's go to November. Mars is now retrograde since September. By the time we get to the beginning of November, so that's like a whole 2 months of Mars in shadow. Mars has been in Gemini in your 9th house. You've been taking a lot of action. You've been really thinking about, your beliefs, your philosophy, your religion. And Mars stations retrograde, you're going to go back on this stuff and go, okay, like, what do I need to re-examine? What do I need to redo? Where do I need to slow down? This is involving money and relationship stuff because Mars rules those 2 topics in your chart. But also Jupiter goes back into Pisces. So Jupiter was in Aries in your 7th house. And there was a huge focus on relationships from like May, June, July, August, September, October, November. It's a long time. So now Jupiter's back in your 6th house of your work, your day-to-day routine, activities, your health. We talked about that at the beginning. Jupiter enters Pisces between January, February, March, and April. So it flies through Pisces. You're going to come back to whatever you were doing back then. Again, so focusing on health, work, coworkers, employment, labor, things like that. So pretty much that leads us to this. So this is August 1st is a really bad day, and so is November 8th. There's like 5 things going on November 8th. One is it's a Mercury Cazimi, and it's a total lunar eclipse on Uranus and squaring Saturn. I can't emphasize this enough. This is pivotal. This is truly pivotal. 2nd house of money, 8th house of death and other people's money. God, I don't even know what it could be at this point. This is also a year in advance from now, but I would assume like a lot of this year is going to be about money stuff, and it all really accumulates to this moment. There's a lot of, and again, just because it's all Scorpio and Uranus doesn't mean it's all bad. This could be unexpected big income. Mercury Cazimi is gaining a lot of clarity on things. This is a lot of things being very understood. Opposite Uranus, it's just the thing is that it's just very turbulent and it's very unexpected. So for example, the Saturn Uranus square, the first one that we had was the AMC GameStop short squeeze. I don't know if you guys don't know the stocks or whatever, because I barely don't. Back in January, I don't know if you guys heard, but pretty much a bunch of people on Reddit fooled a bunch of Wall Street people and made a ton of money and shook up the stock market. So in that example, Uranus brought a lot of destabilizing energy. That doesn't always mean it's a bad thing. A lot of people made bank on that. A lot of random people and a lot of the big billionaire people lost a lot of money, right? This could be good. All I know is that it's very, very dramatic. It's very, very sudden. And it's very like it's squaring Saturn. There's a lot of grinding your teeth, a lot of like herding cats. It's really hard. It's really hard to push things forward. It's very destabilizing. Mars is retrograde here too. So you could have some problems again. Like this is the Mars retrograde. So this is going to bring up problems with the 9th house stuff. So far this is travel, social media, publishing things, anything like that really. So, and then that's like, well, here's the thing. Let's actually just fast forward to this day here, like around the end of November, November 14th. While there is some bad things happening here, we have like a lot of water energy. Venus, Mercury, the Sun, trining Jupiter, Neptune. Then we have like the Moon in Cancer even. November's a very wet month, and this is in your 2nd house of your money and in your 6th house of your work and your routine. So again, a lot of this year is like money and work stuff for you guys, while Mars is retrograde too, maybe being a little bit more clear about certain things, about how maybe where your money goes or how you make money, how you spend it. And that's really November. It's like this really dramatic eclipse, and then it gets wet for a minute, which is kind of nice. And then Mercury and Venus will go into Sagittarius, which really isn't important until until like the very end of November, because like Mercury and Venus, so they'll be conjoining too for a while, which is kind of cool. And then they'll go opposite Mars like November 30th. So this really looks like it's like, okay, if Mars is retrograding in your ninth house and you're kind of like, okay, what do I believe? What do I not believe? What am I doing with my money? What am I not doing with my money? Mercury and Venus in Sagittarius is like really understanding the new direction to take things in. If, for example, if Mars in Gemini is like trying to utilize information that it knows, but it doesn't understand the meaning. Like, for example, with astrology, some people can know the jargon of astrology, but they don't understand like the depth of the meaning or like a certain school of thought behind it to where it makes more sense. Venus and Mercury conjoining being opposite is like things really start to click here. Also, by the time we get to December, Jupiter's now direct in your sixth house. So now things slowly but surely will start moving forward. Like Saturn's direct, Jupiter's direct, Mars will still be retrograde, but things will slowly but surely start to kind of move forward in a big way. And I think this is just when like things really click as far as like what you need to know and what you need to do about it. By December, Jupiter stations direct. And then really by the end of December, Mercury and Venus will go into your fourth house. We're right back to the family living situation stuff, except this time it's not that big of a deal. It's not as intense of a topic. The only thing we've got going on in December too is this like full moon right on Mars. So this will be a big thing of like making decisions and taking actions based on all that stuff that you just learned right here on December 8th. And then Mercury and Venus will go through your fourth house, more focus on the home and living situation. That brings us to literally the last freaking day, December 29th, maybe not the last, but on December 29th, Mercury stations retrograde on Venus. So delay, miscommunication, and home place. But this is, again, over a year from now from the time I'm recording this. So super far in advance. But that's this year for you guys. If you like this video, give me a like. Please show me that you like this video. It really helps me out if you really enjoyed this as well. Make sure if you want to keep up to speed with the monthly horoscopes, check out my Patreon. If you're new here, thank you for checking this video out. Again, like it to let me know that you liked it and that you enjoyed it. Consider subscribing to, the rest of whatever YouTuber says at the end of a video. I don't remember. But anyway, that's what I got for you guys. Thank you so much for being here, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I'll be seeing you next year.